Please join me for the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. Didn't have a meeting last week, so our agenda's a little longer. Our first item on the agenda is consent agenda. It's got one little routine item, and I would move to approve that.
I'll second.
Motion and second. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call for question. Commissioner Boyce?
Aye.
Commissioner Freeman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye and the motion passes. Next item on the agenda is citizens' questions or comments on agenda items. Anybody out there have a question or comment on one of our agenda items? Anybody online?
Nobody online.
Yeah, we'll move on to that. Next item on the agenda is an emergency management department item.
Morning. Emily Ring, Douglas County Emergency Manager. This item is to have your review and approval on accepting a grant agreement. This is an annual EMPG FEMA funding that comes to Douglas County. It is my primary way to offset my department's costs. We apply it to personnel. This year, it's in the amount of $85,587.50. For those listening or watching who don't know, emergency management is all hazards and all partners. We sit between federal, state, county, community, and partners. We do response, recovery, outreach, prevention, preparedness, mitigation, continuity of operations. And this is one of the ways that I can offset my costs to the county. If you have any questions.
Move to approve the grant agreement.
Second that.
We have a motion and a second. Comments?
Just very quickly, as your liaison and all, you work with all the commissioners, thank you for the work you do. It's been spectacular. We had a couple problems over the last year that you've just stepped right in the middle of and helped us get through them. So thank you and your staff that help us get through all this.
Thanks for letting me do my job. Couldn't do it without you guys, so. Any other questions for me on this?
Nope. But I will call for the vote. Commissioner Boyce?
Aye.
Commissioner Freeman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes. Emily, thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is a juvenile department item.
Good morning, Commissioners. Corey Tate, Juvenile Department and LIPSIT Coordinator. The first item before you is a contract number 30002888 with ADAPT for the Criminal Justice Commission Adult Drug Court Grant in the amount of $291,442.93. And this is for the period of 7/1/25 to 8/31/27. This is so they can provide outpatient alcohol and drug treatment services to offenders in the drug court program that's involved with our Criminal Justice Commission. This contract is fully funded through the 25-27 Adult Drug Court Treatment Court Grant Agreement.
I will move to approve the contract.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second.
Couple quick notes. So I do serve on the Criminal Justice Commission, but this is a contract between Douglas County and ADAPT to do this work. I would like to note, and you know, both the other commissioners again are very involved in this. Part of our specialty courts, all of them, and probably the most focused is the drug court, is accountability. And having offenders take a path of fixing their addiction problem, but also being accountable for many other things. And one of those things is housing, right? They're required to find stable housing, and that's a part of their process through the drug court. This is one of those ways where the county helps fund programs that in effect are keeping people from being homeless. And oftentimes that gets missed because this is really focused on drugs. But I would contend many of the people that are homeless today in our county and in our country have drug addiction problems. So this is a way to help them not only get, you know, past their drug addiction problem and get better from that, but also establish, permanent stable housing. So thank you for the work on this.
Thank you.
Yeah, a few comments to add to what Commissioner Freeman said. It just so happens, that last night was the 113th, 112th drug court graduation since the program started. It's pleasing to me. I was instrumental in moving the drug court graduations from the judge's courtroom to the fairgrounds.
So full you couldn't even get in there.
Yeah, because the people in the community need to have the opportunity to see this and to know that this work's being done, because so many times, all we hear about, and I mentioned it the other night, you know, the sheriff and the district attorney get blamed for the revolving door at the jail where guys get a citation and they get released, but our sheriff and our district attorney they're pro accountability. They're tough on crime, but their job is to implement the state law, right? Anyway, the point being, the community doesn't see the successes enough. So with your help, we've gotten word out that these drug court graduations are happening. And we've had to relocate to a section of the community building at the fairgrounds, which, by the way, last night was overflowing, and we're gonna have to look for another bigger spot. Because the community needs to see this work. But as Commissioner Freeman mentioned, one aspect of a requirement for these guys, and last night there was 6 guys that graduated from drug court, just 5 men and 1 woman, that are all today taking their first step into becoming productive members of society with less supervision than they've had in essentially their entire lives. There was 9 kids affected by those 6 people's graduation and 2 grandkids. One of the requirements for them is to find stable housing. So when we hear that the commissioners aren't doing anything about homelessness, that's just not accurate. This is one piece of a very big puzzle that's related to that issue. But more important than that, the thing that's neat to watch is that room overflowed last night. And the majority of those people in that room are drug court alumni themselves. The keynote speaker last night was someone who had graduated from the program and has become a respected member of our community, giving back every day, right? And so there's a major transition that's happening there. And to Commissioner Freeman's point, you know, the majority of the folks that are in the homeless camp, given the opportunity to participate in a program like drug court, would have the opportunity not only to change the trajectory of their life, but also to obtain housing, right? So it's unfortunate that everyone's path doesn't lead to drug court, and that there are a set of parameters that have to be met in order for them to have that opportunity. The cost saving to the taxpayer last night, we have a way of figuring that out. The number of prison months that were diverted saved $1.6 million to Oregon taxpayers in prison costs. And what that means is that those folks who originally, because of their crimes, that were an accumulation of crimes related to their dependency issues and the way that they've self-taught themselves to deal with the hardships of life, resulted in a judge sentencing them to prison. But wait, there's more. Rather than go to prison, how about if you stay here in the Douglas County Jail and you attend this treatment program that's housed inside the jail, and then join this drug court after court program that's gonna help you get your life back on track. And that's what we saw last night, was 6 people who had, some of them already been to prison. All of them had been sentenced to go to prison again, who were given an opportunity to participate in these programs and graduated successfully. And that's not to say that every single drug court graduate never messes up again. I happen to be employing one right now who messed up again and is back in the program. So sometimes it takes another go. But at the end of the day, the program is making a difference. And it may seem expensive, but compared to the alternative, it's inexpensive. And I really encourage people in the community who are tired of the homelessness, tired of the drug cycle, to attend a drug court graduation and see the good work that is being done on that front. And you know, it's all work that we do here. So people just don't know about it.
We also had our youngest graduate ever.
Yeah,
He started the program at 18. He had 14 years of prison hanging on his head at age 18. So he would have been 32 years old getting out of prison, but was given the chance with drug court.
and don't think for a second that these folks aren't being held accountable to their crimes either. This is not,
It's a very strict program.
yeah, this is not an alternative to being held accountable. Believe me, every single one of them is held accountable, but along with being held accountable, they come out of it, you know, every one of these folks goes into this program with a pretty pointed view of the justice system. And they leave the program realizing that the justice system saved their life and their kids' lives. So they have not only been held accountable, but they've also been trained to receive the accountability rather than just double down and continue to be angry and manifest that into the next bad decision in their life. They have been trained how to and taught how to receive the accountability.
So, since we're on that subject, and I think it's important maybe to talk about, besides the good work that's going on there, could you touch, one of you, and either Corey, because you know it, but Commissioner Boyce knows her so well, the difference between Douglas County and many other counties in the state when it comes to parole and probation?
Yeah, so our parole and probation, Douglas County is one of two counties who have at one point in time opted to give the responsibility for parole and probation back to the state of Oregon. So in 34 counties in the state, parole and probation is a function of the county government. And in Douglas County, and I think in Lynn County, is that right?
That's correct.
There was a point in time where if the legislature didn't fund the counties in a way that was appropriate for them to provide the service, that
Current state law requires the state to fund at a minimum level, and if they ever drop below that, counties can opt out.
and we did.
I learned that when I was on the Public Safety Subcommittee of Ways and Means. They give you that number because they know, the state tells you that number. They know if you go below that, many other counties would opt out. But
Yeah.
for one cycle, they were below that number, and Douglas and Lynn County dropped out of it. I'm sorry.
So, yeah, so we've dropped out, and so our parole and probation department is a function of the state of Oregon and not Douglas County. And what that means is the parole and probation director's the state employee. The people that work within the department work for the state of Oregon, they don't work for Douglas County. We lease them an office space over there in the building, and they work in conjunction though with the rest of the community partners. And
The money doesn't flow to us. It goes right from the state right to
Right
parole
to
and
them.
probation. That's the big thing. The public has this impression that the county receives money to do this work, which includes supervision and housing, but we don't even get money for the supervision, let alone the housing, because that's not our function of government, so.
And so, you know, what happens is we have this local public safety coordinating council. I happen to be the chair, but all the players that are involved in the criminal justice system locally they come to the table and they talk about these grant opportunities and what's the best way to spend these monies and what programs should we have and not have. And we track the results and we know whether or not what we're doing is working or not working. And so at a typical, we call it lipstick meeting, you'll have the presiding judge and the sheriff and the DA and someone from the public defender's office, myself, and you, obviously, someone from ADAPT who provides the treatment contract within the jail, and a host of other folks who are all involved in this aspect of the criminal justice system and working towards the outcomes that we ultimately saw last night in drug court graduation, so.
Certainly.
So one additional component of that, and Corey could speak about this too, but a few years back, the Criminal Justice Commission was looking for data sets, trying to understand, how these dollars were being spent, how the funds and services were being coordinated, and what the outcomes were. So they did a grant cycle, they called it the impact grants. And several communities were able to receive some of this money. Basically, it was money to help compile this data, to see really, how best to coordinate services to create the outcomes you're trying to, achieve most efficiently. It's amazing of the different locations that did this. It's the Douglas County data that we constantly look at Criminal Justice Commission. They talk about how well the data was collected, how the coordination works, and how uniquely we as a community collectively, I'm not part of the LIPSIC, but how uniquely all the players work together here and are able to get that data set and try to find innovative ways to work. And I know Corey's right in the middle of that, but just from the outside as being on the state's Criminal Justice Commission, when you're getting reports and data sets and you're seeing things from around the state, when you say, wait a minute, that's Douglas County. I'm the only county commissioner, of course, on Criminal Justice Commission. So when things pop up that are Douglas County based, I always pay special attention, but it's nice to hear that, you and Corey and the rest of the LIPSIC group here and the community members that are part of that are doing that level of work that's recognized at the state.
Yeah, one big help with that is our Tableau program that the Umpqua Health Alliance created. So they track all the cohort members and folks that are nearing that threshold to become an impacts member.
I'm on the board and executive board of Umpqua Health Alliance, so I get to see that stuff there too.
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird
It's a neat
intersection.
chart, yeah.
Yeah, to mention that, to further that up, you're right, it's interesting to mention that. Yesterday, I got to spend a little time with the state's attorney general, Dan Rayfield, and one of the comments he said was he would like to spend more time meeting with the Douglas County Commissioners, because he said there's a couple unique things. One was that, just exactly what you talked about, and the other one, which was our public health system. He said that both are talked about and revered, and he'd like to know more about them. I thought that was made you feel pretty good.
Yeah, we do a couple things a little unique here, but they work good for us.
Anything else? Call for the question, Commissioner Boyce.
Aye.
Commissioner Freeman.
Aye.
Chair votes aye and the motion passes. Corey, you got another one?
Yes, I do, thank you. The next before you is a contract number 30002889 with ADAPT for the Criminal Justice Commission Mental Health Court in the amount of $184,247.37. This is for the period of 7/1/25 to 8/31/27. ADAPT will provide outpatient mental health services to offenders in the mental health court that are involved with the Criminal Justice Commission system. This contract is fully funded by the 25-27 CJC Mental Health Treatment Court Grant Agreement. So this is similar to the drug court grant.
Move to approve the grant agreement.
I'll second that.
A motion and a second. Questions or comments?
Same comments about housing and helping people.
Call for the question, Commissioner Boyce.
Aye.
Commissioner Freeman.
Aye.
Chair votes aye and the motion passes. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you all, I appreciate your support.
Next item up is a management and finance federal audit. Dan Wilson.
Morning Commissioners, Dan Wilson, Chief Financial Officer for Douglas County. I'm here to present to you today the results of the single audit that we had performed that just finished up this last year for the year ending June 30th, 2025. As I've mentioned before in meetings, we are audited on a lot of levels here at the county for our finances. Ensuring that we do things right and we spend the money that we receive from outside agencies in the correct manner. This audit is more narrow than our general audit, which we get every year, which we wrapped that up in December of last year. This one is specific to federal funding that we receive, and any entity that's not a federal government that receives $750,000 or more in funding is required to have what we call a single audit. And it's narrow. It's only specific to the funds received from the federal government, whether that's directly from them or through the state. But they're looking at how we spend the money, and making sure that it is spent according to the way it was intended from the federal government. And I'd like to say that we had a clean audit, what we call a clean audit, unmodified auditor's opinion. And for the year ending June 30th, 2025.
Move to acknowledge the receipt of the audit?
Yeah.
I'll move to acknowledge the receipt of the audit.
I'll second.
Okay, motion and second. Any questions or comments?
It's interesting how often you hear, we need to audit, you need to audit. And, you know, being your liaison and going up there quite often to your office, you guys are always in the middle of an audit. It's a constant part of what you do is complete audits. That is a function of the way the government works, but it's also a function of Douglas County because the bulk of the funding we get is not from property tax. So it is from these other sources that all have these requirements. You know, you're talking about the federal requirement, you know, for the federal funding we get, but, you know, virtually every, you know, all but, what is it, less than 10%. Actually, I think of the spending, it's like 6.5% is from property tax. And that in itself has audits, but that's part of the big general audit. But all these other things have, all these other funding sources and grants and program elements and different things that we get funding from all have a requirement of reporting and auditing. So it's always amazing to me when you hear somebody say, well, we need to audit them. Well, okay, which one would you like to look at? You got a stack of them up there, right? I mean, you just do it constantly. So thank you for that work. And again, I know it's part of what you do. It's part of your job and your team's job. You guys do a fantastic job on the auditing, but the reason the auditing comes out well is because you did it right to begin with. And I think that sometimes gets missed too, is that, you know, having, you know, no findings or no, you know, unmodified as you described, means that the work was done right originally. You didn't have to fix anything. It was done right. So thank you.
Boys. Just like to say, you know,
Good job.
real quick, that it probably didn't mean as much to me before I got on this board when I hear that the county had, you know, I had come to meetings and stuff and heard that the county had these unmodified audits and that they were, I just figured that was matter of course, that's the way it should be, right? But it wasn't until I started serving on some of the boards that used that federal money and used that state money and had to do the exact same thing that I realized how difficult it is to get that unmodified opinion and that clean audit. And not only difficult, but rare, at least for the first or second pass. So you guys do an amazing job and I'm always appreciative of that.
Thank you.
Call for question, Commissioner Boyce?
Aye.
Commissioner Freeman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye and the motion passes. Thank you, Dan. Next item on the agenda is a Public Works Department item. Been a while.
Yes. Good morning, Commissioners. Scott Adams, Public Works. Item number 7 is a contract between Douglas County and Pacific Corp. I'll try to explain as best I can, but for Pacific Corp to act as a qualified reporting entity for Galesville Hydroelectric Project on behalf of Douglas County. Douglas County and Pacific Corp have a contract for us to provide power for Pacific Corp, give us the generation revenue back. But as part of that, as we were required to give energy credits back to Pacific Corp. And through those energy credits, they have to be documented somehow. And this is a contract with Pacific Corp for us to utilize them to document those energy credits. Apparently it's a little bit cumbersome and process to do, but there's a $280 initial fee and then a $50 a month processing fee for the energy credits. So this will allow Pacific Corp to process those energy credits on our behalf that we provide to them for our contract.
Move to approve the contract.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. You guys have any questions or comments? I'll call for question. Commissioner Boyce?
Aye.
Commissioner Freeman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye and the motion passes. This item is also a Public Works item.
Again, Scott Adams, Public Works. This is a contract between Douglas County and Fields Seal Coat and Excavation LLC to provide miscellaneous road maintenance on an on-call and as-needed basis.
I will move to approve the contract.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call for question. Commissioner Boyce?
Aye.
Commissioner Freeman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye and the motion passes. Thank you, Scott. Next item is a sheriff's department item. Sheriff's in the house.
Good morning, Commissioners. John Hanlon, Douglas County Sheriff. Item 9 is the First Amendment to the IGA CJ 2025-0777 with the Oregon State Marine Board for our Marine Patrol. This agreement is amended to add back $77,637 to the agreement for fiscal year 2027. This increases the total amount payable to Douglas County from $186,984 to $264,621. All other agreement terms remain unchanged, and again, this will fund one patrol deputy, the equipment for him to perform his marine patrols throughout the county, and will also bring back a Marine cadet that will be able to be with him every day that he goes out and does his patrols. It'll be a part-time position with no benefits.
We'll move to approve the intergovernmental agreement amendment.
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call for the question. Commissioner Boyce?
Aye.
Commissioner Freeman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes. Thank you, Sheriff. We move to commissioner comments. I've got a little off-agenda item I wanted to talk about, I wanted to bring up and see what you guys thought. Had to discuss. Pretty soon here in May, where the people of the state are gonna be asked to vote on an initiative petition to repeal the infrastructure and gas tax that the state of Oregon put in a long session. And we originally, when that was being talked about in the legislature, we, the Douglas County, opposed that. And I didn't know if we want to talk about now about possibly making a resolution, make sure the voters know exactly what that means, and bring attention to the fact, because it's not normally on a May ballot, and it's something we might want to talk about. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it.
I'm a hard yes.
Or yes on talking about it.
Yes.
Okay.
Want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, of course, when this was being talked about in the legislature, originally, I happened to have been the chair last year, so knowing that the challenges around affordability and people not having the ability to pay more for gas or registration for their vehicles, I had called each of our legislators and let them know that, you know, despite what the Association of Oregon Counties or other things they may hear, that we were opposing the gas tax increase. So I mentioned a couple things when I made that phone call, and I'm happy to mention them here, and I think they should be part of a resolution. So one is here at Douglas County, from the moment Chris and I started and Tom joined us, we've had to learn to live within our means. We don't just go out and ask for more money because things get more expensive. We have shrunk the size of county government to better match the ability of what people can pay for their level of government. The state never seems to do that. They want more, so they just go ask for more and take more and demand more. And ask is the wrong word, because when you pull up to a gas pump to get gas, they don't ask if you want to pay the tax. When you register your car, they don't say, do you want to pay the higher price or the lower price? They just make you pay it. So the state has this interesting mindset that people can just pay more and more constantly for everything, and they seem to have no regard for what the hardship that causes. So again, Douglas County, you know, we've worked very hard to live within our means. We don't ever say, when we look at fees here for anything, we don't say, well, what's somebody else charging? Are we, you know, we in line? Are we the average? You know, another county charges X amount so we can raise our rates. We figure out what it costs to do something and charge no more than that. And the two examples I'll give today is we have the lowest building department fees in the state. Not so we can say we have the lowest building department fees in the state, because we figured out how to run the building department for less money than other counties do. That fee that we charge for building permits, it's the lowest in the state, but it's the lowest because our staff and the commissioners and everybody here has figured out a way to perform that service at that low cost. Same thing with landfill fees. We have the lowest landfill fees, and it's, again, not because we wanna just be able to say we have the lowest landfill fees. We have the lowest landfill fees because of the way the department's being ran, the way it's being managed, from the commissioner's office right on through, and finance and everybody else that has a role in that, and many other things we do here. So, recognizing you have the authority to raise rates and fees and charge people more, may make budgeting easier, but it's certainly not the right thing to do. The state never looks at it that way. And then finally with ODOT, we run a road department, not unsimilar to the work that ODOT does. Theirs is, of course, a much bigger scale, and we work with ODOT through our road department. But there's things that the road department does here more efficiently, but there's some costs that ODOT in the Oregon legislature pushes down on all road projects. Things that have no business in road maintenance or bridge rebuilding or infrastructure projects, things like DEI. I mean, pavement's pavement, and injecting social issues and political issues into programs that don't need them and shouldn't have them is very expensive. So the state spends money on DEI stuff through ODOT. But then they do other things. They came out with this idea that if, used to be if you did a project and there was a certain value of the project, a certain dollar amount, if you went over that, or if it was a large enough project, you'd have to do new sidewalks and ADA ramps and all the, they call it multimodal stuff, which, can double the cost of a project. But if you just were repaving a road, you didn't have to do that. Well, a few years back, they decided now if you repave a road, you have to do all that. The big example of that we saw, the first one that had to deal with that, was the city of Sutherland. When they redid their Main Street, they just needed to repave the roads. But they had to rip out all their sidewalks and intersections and curbs and everything, and it was a tremendous cost. And so we wonder why the cost of these projects have gone up so much, and it's because of things like that. So what we're facing at the state, county, and city levels is now we just can't do projects. So instead of getting the road repaved, and yeah, the sidewalk would be nice if it was all new and nice, but it was still a sidewalk. But now we're finding where we just can't do the project because they've made it so burdensome and so expensive because of all the other stuff they want done. And then finally, I was talking to one of our mayors from one of our smaller cities the other day, and they were trying to do a project, and they were gonna require this sidewalk. And he said there's literally nobody walks in that area. He called it a sidewalk to nowhere. And again, nothing against the idea of having great sidewalks. We do Safe Routes to School projects where you are gonna have kids using sidewalks, so we believe in, having the right infrastructure where it's needed, but having everything everywhere is incredibly expensive. And that's really, just a handful of the reasons why the cost of ODOT and road maintenance has gone through the roof. So for those reasons, I told our legislators when I called them that we don't need to increase the tax and the fees. We need to figure out how to make sure that ODOT is performing the basic function, the core function of maintaining roads, and cut out some of this other stuff.
That's all good information and I appreciate it, and I second all of that. There's also a political component to this thing that people I think are aware of, and if they're not, they need to be aware of. The shenanigans that they pulled at the state level in order to put this referendum on the May ballot instead of having it on the November ballot is purely a political play. And the idea there is that it's, not gonna be on the same ballot as the governor's election, but it's also in a primary situation where not as many people tend to show up to vote. And this is an important issue. It's obvious by the number of people who went out in record time and signed the petition in order to get it on the ballot. But I don't want those folks who want to have an opportunity to voice their opinion about this one way or the other, to miss the chance because it's on the May election ballot, not on the November ballot. So anything that we can do to let folks know that that's coming is gonna be a good idea.
Yeah, frankly, that's what I thought. I thought if we just at least had a resolution talking about our opinion on it, but it's ringing the bell a little bit. I know I was on the legislative committee for the Association of Oregon Counties when this got taken up, and it's a body of a bunch of different counties. All the counties really have a seat at the table. And the discussion is, oh boy, yeah, we need this, we need this kind of money to, continue to fund our infrastructure stuff. But there was no talk, to your point, of, well, no, maybe we should be pushing them to lower some of the costs that have nothing to do with getting the road paved. And I felt like really it was falling on deaf ears talking about that. Unfortunately, we're in a mode of tax and spend and not try to reduce waste, and I'm thankful that we feel differently here.
So you want a motion?
I do, I'm looking for a motion.
Okay, I would move that the Douglas County Board of Commissioners drafts a resolution to the talking points we had here at the meeting and sign that resolution and publish it.
Second.
Motion and second, any further questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Commissioner Boyce?
Aye.
Commissioner Freeman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye and the motion passes. Next item on the agenda is commissioner comments.
Nothing for me.
So a couple things, more talking about some of the work I'm doing at the federal level, so I'm not sure everybody quite understands, but we're on track this year through the ONC Timber Receipt Share Program for Douglas County to receive as much or more from that one funding stream, or ONC Timber Receipts, which we use as general fund money. It comes in just like tax dollars. But the amount is on track to be the same, equal to or greater than all the property taxes paid by the citizens of Douglas County. So it's pretty amazing the difference of changing the formula and just a little bit more increased harvest with the new administration. But, we are having a revision to the resource management plan, which is what guides the amount of harvest. Douglas County was the first county accepted as a cooperating agency. I've attended the first cooperating agency meeting. We'll be doing those monthly to begin with, and they might have additional ones in between as it gets ramped up. The idea is to have a draft out this summer of the new resource management plan revision and implement it by the early part of next year. A couple things that keep getting reported not quite accurately is pretty frustrating to me. One is they call it ONC Forest. These are not forests like the Umpqua National Forest. It's not a big contiguous area. It's BLM manages 2.1 million acres. The Forest Service manages about 400,000. So it's about 2.5 million acres of checkerboard, square mile chunks of timberland. The neighboring square mile is industrial timberland, privately owned. So the saying that it's 2.5 million acre forest gives the illusion that it's this big huge forest somewhere, and it's not. It's these checkerboard chunks throughout Western Oregon, primarily within 20 or 30 miles of the railroad that goes right through all of our communities. The other frustration I have is the constant talk about the trees are all gone, or we don't want to harvest the trees. Today, there's over 50% more timber on those ONC timberlands than when they started managing them in 1937. They are way overstocked. We live with these huge fires every year, and at least in part is because of the fuel load. They were in a management style where they were harvested at some point and replanted, and purposely overstocked, replanted with the idea of going and thinning, pre-commercial thinning and then commercial thinning, and then just walked away from. So they were intentionally overstocked. And on top of that, they're wildly productive. They grow huge amounts of fiber every year. Matter of fact, the BLM establishes the annual growth on that, actually on the 2.1 million acres, their annual growth is established at 1.2 billion board feet of wood a year. New wood every year. and they're harvesting 200 million. So they're leaving 1 billion board feet of additional wood every single year. These numbers are all right out of the resource management, but I was gonna bring the book out, it's about that thick. I was part of the resource management plan development last time Douglas County was a cooperating agency, and I made it for about the last year and a half as that plan was developed. I know it pretty well. Again, all these numbers are right out of that information from the BLM. The other interesting thing, in 2014, when they did the inventory, the age classifications for the timber stands, 56% of them were over 80 years old, so older than the management period. So again, the concept that the trees have all been harvested, over half of the stands had not been harvested. So tremendous amount of wood out there, it's wildly productive. The concept of doing some reasonable amount of harvest and trying to maintain these lands in a healthy state should be pretty uncontroversial, but it's amazing how wrong information gets people spun up. They use the word restoration quite a bit, and I'm always, my first question when I hear that is, what do you want to restore it to? If there was 50, when they first started to get ready to do the ONC Act, they went out and they rode horses to every 40 acres, did a visual inspection, and then an inventory of the wood on the ground. There was approximately 50 billion board feet of standing timber leading up to the 1937 ONC Act. From 1937 through 2014, they harvested approximately 50 billion board feet, and at that time there was 73 billion board feet in the inventory. So it gained, and then since then, you've been putting almost 1 billion board feet on, so well over 50% more on there. What's interesting, to get it back to the 50 billion board feet, you would literally, for the next 20 to 25 years, you'd have to cut over 2 billion board feet to restore it back to where you started. That's how much growth there has been. The idea of approaching sustained yield, maybe 1 billion board feet a year, grows 1.2, you'd still be leaving 200 million board feet a year on the landscape. So every 5 years, you'd have another 1 billion board feet of additional overstocked land, even at 1 billion board feet. So I think people are unaware of the growth, how much it grows. And the best way I can explain that to people is most of us, and some of us not often enough, maintain our yard, right? We mow the grass, we trim the bushes, and we have a maintained yard at some level of trying to maintain it. Imagine if you did that, say, for 50 years a certain way, and then one day you decided, hey, I'm not gonna do that anymore. And then waited about 30 years and went out and looked at it. That's exactly what we've done to these timberlands. We managed them in a way that was called sustained yield, which is a forestry term, means never harvest more than what grows. Did that for 50 years. All the values people want, the clean air, the clean water, the recreation opportunities, the economy, the services that we were able to provide for government, all were very well documented and very well performed during that time. After they stopped managing under the principles of sustained yield, every one of those values, including the habitat value, which is not part of the ONC Act, but is now part of the values that people want on these timberlands, every one of those values has been degraded from the lack of sustained yield management. So we just heard this morning, working on all this stuff, that there's gonna be an announcement today and it'll get filed tomorrow, some new category exclusions for post-fire salvage and post-fire and post-catastrophic event. So if we have a big flood, wind, bug kill, fire, they're gonna do a new 5,000 acre category exclusion so that they can go clean up some of those areas and replant them. And they weren't able to do that after the Archie Creek fire. So that's great news. We're excited about that. There'll be a 30-day comment period. The Association of ONC Counties and Douglas County will comment on giving the BLM more tools to better manage those lands. The other quick thing I want to talk about is we had a DFPA budget meeting yesterday morning. I serve on the DFPA Board of Directors, Douglas Forest Protection Association. I'm an ex officio member. I attend their meetings. They wanted to make sure the Board of Commissioners in the county knew how much they appreciated the collaboration with the new radio project They wanted to thank you specifically, but the board as a whole. Tom, I know you've worked with them on that. The other thing they wanted to thank the board for, and I don't know that a lot of people know this, but we fund the Firewise program through DFPA. So Douglas County funds Firewise. So those communities that are able to achieve Firewise status with the help of the DFPA, the funding that pays for those employees to go out and do that Firewise work comes from Douglas County, and they wanted to thank us for continuing to contribute to that program. So that's what I had for you today.
Thank you.
So one quick question.
Sure.
And what I just heard you say, Tim, was a new categorical exclusion for up to 5,000 acres from these wind events or catastrophic events, which could include wind events. So making sure that people understand what that means. You know, there's in recent past, the Snowmageddon event knocked down a bunch of trees. And in a lot of places, like at Hubbard Creek, for example, those trees were never picked up and sold into the market. And they were every bit as valuable the day that they fell down as they were when they were standing. But they were not sold into the market. They were not turned into a public asset. They were left on the ground for fuel, which ended up burning the Hubbard Creek fire. Having a categorical exclusion that says, okay, this land has now burned up, it's not going to continue to be productive for what we've categorized it as. Now we can go back in and clean it up and replant it and start rebuilding it back to what it was intended to be is a good thing. The part of that I heard that's a little frustrating to me, and I'm sure to you also, is the 5,000 acre limit. Because I'm guessing the Archie Creek fire was somewhere around 100,000 acres.
Bealham's fire was about 40,000, but yeah.
Yeah, and I would say half of that was, you know, on government property, so let's just call that a good start.
Well, and also I should have made sure people knew what a category exclusion is. It does not exclude all the work they have to do as far as the, they call it NEPA, National Environmental Policy work. They still have to do, it's just an expedited process to get them to the project quicker, and recognizing that time, you know, once trees are dead or dying, the clock starts and the value goes away pretty quickly. So it helps expedite the process.
I do find it interesting though, I'd heard a rumor yesterday, unsubstantiated, but a rumor that they'd reached a settlement with Pacific Corp of $75 million for the Archie Creek part of the damage that the BLM had incurred on that forest. And so I wonder how they value that. How did they value that? I mean, it wasn't because that was timber that was scheduled to be harvested. That's clearly not. It should be, but it's not. It's not the cost of replanting because they haven't done that and they're not going to do that. So it's interesting to me. The only conclusion I can come to is that they valued it in the fact that if we were to harvest it, which they should, this is how much we might receive.
I think that's probably an accurate.
But it's just interesting that.
And it's interesting also, in the ONC Act, there's a section that talks about recoveries. So in the timber shared receipt program, it talks about recoveries. So it'll be a legal landmine to get through, but we're working through it now, our Association of ONC Counties. Of course, this fire happened when we were on Skirrow Schools, not eligible for timber receipts. However, the recovery is occurring in a year that we are going to get timber receipts. So following the logic of, doesn't matter when a timber sale is offered for sale or bought, the timber receipt is generated when it's sold, when it's yarded is actually the word that it uses. So when the government collects the money, that's the year the timber receipt is established. So if they collect a recovery this year in a year that we're taking timber receipts, we will be very interested to see if the ONC counties get our 75% of that.
One more quick thing for me. So I know it's April 1st today, and it's felt like we've had, that summer's just about on us. But I will tell you, and the radio's done a really good job of advertising this, but we're going to have a significant snow event in the Cascades in the next couple of days. So much so that travel's gonna be very treacherous, and I want people to remember we're still in the middle of winter. It seemed like it's been summer, but there's gonna be a couple periods where we're getting several long period of time where we're getting over an inch an hour, and several hours where we're gonna get 2 inches an hour. It's a pretty significant amount of snowfall, be treacherous driving. I know the lake's open up at Diamond Lake for fishing, but please, everybody be careful. There's a period of time there we just shouldn't be going.
Mr. Chairman, I have to have some time off. When is that? I'd like to go up there.
And with that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you all for coming.